B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, February 5th, 2019. And the delayed State of the Union message is scheduled for this evening. It'll be another one of those lousy wooden performances from Trump. He is terrible with a teleprompter. And the State of the Union message is always a laundry list of applause lines for his side of the chamber. So we find this very predictable, and if anyone chooses to skip the State of the Union message, you have my full blessing. I'll watch it because I consider it my duty. And I'm looking forward to Stacey Abrams' speech afterward, and then Bernie Sanders is going to lay out some comments after that, too. So it'll be just a fabulous evening. I can't wait. And the funniest part is, this morning I got up and I made sure that my bullshit detector is fully charged, because it's going to get a workout this evening. There's no doubt about that. And then I heard Kellyanne Conway has announced that Trump's speech is going to have a call for more bipartisan cooperation. And get this, unity. And minutes later, I flipped to another page on the internet to learn that Trump had tweeted more insults at Chuck Schumer. So I don't think it'll last very long. And, of course, as soon as he calls for unity and cooperation, he's going to say that the Democrats need to unify by just giving him the money he wants to fund his ill-fated border wall. And that's where the division will be, the wounds will be reopened and the political battles will start once again. And, of course, each political party has its own divisive strategies. Over at the Intercept today, this is another great story by Lee Fung. House Republican lawmakers are being encouraged by their party's leadership to play up gruesome murders, rapes, and other crimes committed by undocumented immigrants in the United States, going back as far as 20 years. And the real goddess of the Republican conference, Chair Liz Cheney, the spawn of Dick and Lynn, she provided the caucus and staff with a messaging update that compiled immigrant crimes by date and congressional district. The design is to put heat on Democratic members of Congress by pointing up crimes that were committed by undocumented immigrants and blaming the Democrats for that. And, of course, going back 20 years, well, it covers sins of both political parties, if you want to look at it that way. But this is where the angst comes from. And we know that immigrants commit crime, whether they are legal or not, at a much lower rate than landed Americans. And yet, they use the exaggerated anecdote to try to paint a picture of every immigrant as a potential criminal, if not an actual criminal, deserving deportation. Then also at the Intercept today, Ryan Grimm has a good report that shows what's going on in the Democratic Party. And Nancy Pelosi, who has made it clear that she is going to permit committees to hold hearings about proposals for Medicare for all and maybe other flavors of single-payer health care. Back in December, she dispatched her top health policy aide, Wendell Primus, to a meeting with Blue Cross Blue Shield executives. And he assured the insurance industry that they don't need to worry about those pesky lefty socialist Democrats who are calling for Medicare for all. And Primus, in his presentation, said, well, Medicare for all is too expensive. Monies are needed for other priorities, was on a slide that he showed the insurers. The opposition that comes from people like insurance executives and the money they can bring to lobbying efforts. And then unnamed implementation challenges. So Pelosi is content to try to shore up the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, including at the state level. And it appears, while they deny that there was any deal offered here, that by saying we're not going to pursue Medicare for all, and here is our agenda, well, I think that's the strong suggestion of here's what I'll do for you. I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back. And so what Pelosi is aiming for is to lower health care costs and prescription drug prices. Now, that is tinkering around the edges, because the idea that we're going to lower the actual cost, whether it's insurance or the amount of money that you owe doctors and hospitals in a given year, is really far-fetched without fundamental structural changes. Obamacare was designed to prop up the pharmaceutical industries and to ensure a whole new wave of government-subsidized customers for the for-profit health insurance industry. And they're not about to lower your health care costs anytime soon. Meanwhile, there is unity among Democrats, and Republicans, of course, are piling on too, trying to force Ralph Northam out as governor of Virginia. Yesterday, I led the podcast with this story, and if you listened, you know that I'm outraged. Not because I think that Ralph Northam is a man who must remain as governor of Virginia, but because this is a political hit, pure and simple. And last night I went all over the TV channels. I forced myself to watch 10 minutes of the CBS Evening News with some new anchor I've never heard of before. And to its credit, the CBS report did mention that earlier last week, Ralph Northam was embroiled in a political battle over abortion rights and legislation introduced in Virginia. But they didn't make it any link to the surprise surfacing on Friday of this picture that was in his medical school yearbook in 1984. And while the Lieutenant Governor Fairfax has made a lot of noise about how he is the target of a political hit as well, I didn't hear one word, even over on MSNBC, suggesting that Northam and Fairfax are being targeted by right-wing, pro-life extremists. And that's what's going on here. But the Washington Post writes a story, printed it out, it runs almost 5 pages. And they talk about how the Democrats have adopted zero tolerance so that they can look purer than Trump. It acknowledges regret over the quick boot given to Al Franken. Doesn't appear to be any tears shed over John Conyers, the congressman from Michigan who was forced out after allegations of sexual improprieties. And here, one of the people I loathe on the American political scene, little Joe Lieberman. I rode in an elevator one time with him, and I towered over that guy. He was the former senator from Connecticut when he was when he lost his primary to Ned Lamont. He re-registered as an independent and held on to his seat for one more term. He was the middling vice presidential candidate with Al Gore way back in 2000. And Joe Lieberman said, hey, I think there's a rush to judgment that's unfair to Northam. 1, he says he wasn't in that picture. 2, I think we ought to fairly ask him, did he know the picture was on his page of that yearbook? And then 3, really, he ought to be judged on the context of his whole life. I think he deserves a chance to prove what really is his essence, not to rush him out of office, unfortunately, for political reasons. Wow, I never thought I'd agree with Joe Lieberman. Because, you know, if you mispronounce his name intentionally, it's Lieberman. So, as I watched this play out, I said yesterday, I don't have any investment in Ralph Northam. Friends who posted on Facebook who live in Virginia indicate that he's a corporate stooge, and they aren't invested in him either. But if the Republicans can dig up a age-old photograph and lead to the immediate lynching of a sitting governor, this will only embolden the Republicans to do it more. And sure, Democrats have responded by posting pictures of Mitch McConnell in front of a Confederate flag. But nothing's going to change as a result. And the Washington Post ranks the way the Democratic presidential candidates were swift to judge and to tweet. Julian Castro saw the news breaking on Twitter. He was the first at 7:07 p.m. on Friday. Then Kamala Harris of California tweeted at 7:37. And on the campaign trail, Kirsten Gillibrand was asked about it. She said, well, I haven't seen these pictures, but I heard about them. They sound very disturbing. 2 hours later, she demanded that he resign. Elizabeth Warren joined in, Cory Booker piled on, Sherrod Brown, and Amy Klobuchar. Bernie Sanders waited until Saturday, as did Joe Biden, to call for the resignation of Governor Northam. And I think that they're all wrong. Not on the optics. I understand that this racist image is, sick, twisted, and it is despicable. But I think it's worse. The Democrats are enabling extremists of the other party to just pop a picture and boom. The governor is supposed to resign in humiliation. If that's the way our politics are going to be run, I don't think any of these knuckleheads can really survive close scrutiny of all the photos that they've been in since they were in college. The other thing that will unite the chamber at the State of the Union tonight, there'll be a wave of bipartisan applause when Trump denounces Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela and thunders that it's time for him to go. How far will Trump go? I'm not sure. But it appears that nothing is too far for virtually all of the Democrats. As I've mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, and Julian Castro. They are the four I know of, elected officials, who have said that we shouldn't intervene in Venezuela. But to a person, I believe they all support ousting Maduro through some extra-legal means by scheduling early elections, which is not called for in the Constitution, or just any other way that we can force our will. And the good news is that Pope Francis has said that he is willing to mediate a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Venezuela. He's been asked by President Maduro, and on his way back from the United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi, where the Pope had been visiting the Arabian Peninsula, first time for a Pope, he acknowledged that he had received a letter from Maduro, but he hasn't read it yet. And he said if Juan Guaido, the opposition leader, agreed to join in the mediation, that the Pope would participate. Now, we've already heard Guaido and Trump rule out any kind of conversation, dialogue, or mediation with Maduro. Maybe the Pope's stature can change that. I am not holding my breath, but I like to be optimistic. And in the meantime, Maduro has issued a thinly veiled threat to Guaido that he may be soon locked up in prison. Addressing a meeting of supporters last night, Maduro questioned how long Guaido can persist with his so-called virtual term as president. Until 2025, that's the length of his term that he was just sworn in for in January, or until he ends up in jail by order of the Supreme Court of Justice. Now, I have to say, if I were in Maduro's position, I would have already detained Juan Guaido and probably deported him to the United States. But Maduro has restrained himself, at least so far. Last night, he also railed against Trump's extremist policies toward Venezuela, gave no hint he's preparing to stand aside. Quote, with this show of humanitarian aid, the U.S. is planning to send convoys via Colombia. They are trying to send a message Venezuela has to go begging to the world. And there are observers who fear that the aid convoys risk sparking, or may be designed to spark, a confrontation with Venezuelan troops loyal to Maduro. So the meddling continues. It's being ratcheted up. And we're going to watch this on a daily basis. I've linked to an excellent commentary published by The Guardian today, and it's written by Tamir Porras Ponce Leon, who was chief of staff to President Maduro from 2007 to 2013, and he's now a professor at a place in Paris. And he offers what I think is an honest, unemotional recap of the events that brought us here. And he said, look, Juan Guaido has been around for a long time. He came to prominence in 2007 as a member of a generation of students leading protests against socialism. That's when Chavez was in power. He's part of an opposition that never stopped challenging Chavez, even in his heyday, and who naturally doubled down as soon as the less assertive Maduro took office. The challenges to Maduro's legitimacy began the moment he was elected. His presidential opponent, Enrique Capriles, labeled the 2013 election a fraud without providing any supportive evidence. Capriles called on his followers to ventilate their anger in the streets, a move resulting in the killing of a number of Chavistas. In January of 14, Guaido's political party launched a nationwide insurrectionary movement aimed at forcing Maduro out of office. So this is the culmination of a now 4-year effort. And it wasn't until Trump came to power and imposed new sanctions on Venezuela that Guaido and the remaining oligarchs in Venezuela decided that this is the moment to assert that last year's election was illegitimate without any proof. They don't even bother, and the corporate media here and in other parts of the world just treats it as fact. And Ponce Leon closes by saying, Venezuelans have a right to coexist. They should be allowed to resolve their problems in a democratic, peaceful, and sovereign manner. There's also a good commentary at Consortium News under the byline of globe-trotting international reporter Patrick Lawrence, and he takes the U.S. to task for not recognizing that regime change wars are passé, and that because Russia and China have deep financial commitments, investments in Venezuela, that they are likely to checkmate the U.S. on any kind of military intervention. He also points out that John Bolton has announced that Venezuela is just the first on his list. He wants to cause the government to fall in Cuba, and he wants to get rid of Daniel Ortega in Managua, Nicaragua. The troika will crumble, predicts John Bolton. And Lawrence argues that this is an effort to resuscitate the Monroe Doctrine from 1823, and that the regime change operation in Ukraine, in many ways, set some of these proxy conflicts in place. I think it's a good piece worth reading. I've linked to it in the show file. Invite you to check it out at peterbcollins.com. Hey, and while you're there, if you're not currently a subscriber, let's fix that. Just click on the menu tab, then click on Become a Subscriber. Takes you to the sign-up page, and you can choose $5, $10, $20 a month. Brian Mazzy and Bill Janetta kick in $5 a month. Ted Kelly, he's a $10 a month guy. And Terry Paris has multiple subscriptions. I don't know what it totals every month. I hope she does. But I invite you to support my work. I'd really appreciate it. And I will be announcing a new bonus gift next week for new annual subscribers. I still have copies of John Dist's rock and roll CD, American University, and I'd love to send you one with a new annual subscription. So yesterday, federal prosecutors in New York, who don't appear to be directly connected to the Mueller investigation, laid out subpoenas demanding more documents from the Trump Inauguration Committee. They want all of the documents from the donors and guests, any benefits that were handed out, including photo ops with Trump, federal disclosure filings, vendors, contracts, and more. The committee raised $107 million. It's believed that there was a lot left over, and it'll be interesting to see if we ever find out where it all went. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors have been interviewing witnesses about the flow of foreign money to three powerful law and lobbying firms based in Washington that Paul Manafort recruited to help improve the image of Yanukovych in Ukraine. And they're zeroing in on Vin Weber at Mercury Public Affairs, Tony Podesta, formerly of the Podesta Group has crumbled, so it no longer exists, and the law firm Skadden Arps, which is where Greg Craig, the former Obama White House counsel, once a guy who I thought highly of, he is in their sights as well. And what we're learning is that they were hired by Manafort. He used a phony nonprofit in Europe to try to insulate them from having to register as foreign agents. And in their advocacy for Yanukovych, it's pretty clear to me at least that these three guys did violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And it remains to be seen if the individuals will be prosecuted. The Skadden Arps law firm has had to cough up $4.5 million, which is what they earned on that particular episode. And we'll be watching this one because I think it does. It does likely lead to prosecution of the individuals. I haven't had time to read them, but BuzzFeed dropped 2 mega stories today, and I'm going to take them home, read them tonight. I'll comment on them tomorrow. I did link to them in the show file if you want to get a head start. One of them is a follow-up on the Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016, and they focus on a Russian-born lobbyist named Rinat Akhmetshin and payments that he received through offshore accounts and front companies totaling about $500,000 before and after the meeting. Now, I will say this, that BuzzFeed has documents to support this. And unlike the recent report that they are standing by, that, quote, Trump told Cohen to lie to Congress about the Russia deal, the Moscow-Trump Tower plan, well, that story is still up, despite the partial refutation by Special Counsel Mueller's office. So we'll see what's in that article when I have a chance to read it. And also the other one that's even longer is written by a team of reporters, as was the other one, and the team includes Jason Leopold and Anthony Cormier, who were responsible for that Trump told Cohen to lie story. And this one, again, is based on documents. And I've read the narrative. I haven't had time to look at the underlying documents. But what it is a timeline of the efforts by Felix Sater and Michael Cohen to drum up a deal with Russian developers and to get the imprimatur of Vladimir Putin for the Trump-Moscow project. And I find this interesting. It does appear to be one of the reasons why Trump obstructed justice, was trying to keep secrets about his contacts with Russia. He did lie during the campaign that he has 0 deals with Russia, and it was only narrowly true because he was really trying hard to get a deal with Russia. But it was technically accurate that he didn't have one at that time. So I'm looking forward to reading both those stories, and we will check them out. Also want to mention that yesterday the New York Times reported, actually it was Sunday, this is from the Sunday paper, that Deutsche Bank actually turned Donald Trump down for a multi-million-dollar loan in 2016. And it was because they felt that his campaign for president was going to add risk to the potential repayment of that loan. This is another story that blows a hole in the Trump-Russia narrative that has been widely circulated and treated as fact. Because we were led to believe that Deutsche Bank was a big financer of Trump and his companies, and the impression was they never turned him down. We know Anthony Kennedy's son was the loan officer who was writing loans to Trump, but we didn't know that he was part of the team that said 9 to Trump on millions of dollars of loan applications in 2016. Yesterday, Trump made it official. You know, the guy who said he was going to drain the swamp. He's filling it up with another lobbyist, this guy who lobbied for the oil industry, who is now being nominated to run the Interior Department. That is David Bernhardt, who's been deputy secretary, and he was doing the dirty work for Ryan Zinke, or the detail work, to, allow drilling and fracking on public lands and all kinds of other rollbacks of protections of the lands that are entrusted to the Interior Department. Will he be rejected by the Senate? I doubt it. The head of CENTCOM, the Central Command, the guy overseeing American troops in the Middle East. He testified before a Senate hearing on Capitol Hill today. General Joseph Votel did. I was not consulted on Trump's surprise decision in December to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. Votel said that the militant group, the Islamic State, retains leaders, fighters, facilitators, and resources that will continue to fuel a menacing insurgency. We do have to keep the pressure on this network. They have the ability of coming back together if we don't. And he added that territory under Islamic State control has been reduced to less than 20 square miles, and it would all be recaptured by U.S.-backed forces prior to the U.S. withdrawal, which he said would be carried out in a deliberate and coordinated manner. Now, that's coded language for saying that the president was not deliberate or coordinated. And one of our listeners was politely challenging my characterization the other day, so let me take a moment here to explain. I still support Trump's intention to pull the measly 2,000 or 4,000 American troops out of Syria. Never should have been there. There's no authorization for it. And, we do have to acknowledge the consequences, that the Kurds are facing extinction at the hands of both Turkey and Syria, and that Trump was not very deliberate in doing this. Now, based on the work of Gareth Porter, who wrote recently that Votel and the other generals were told 6 months ago, 6 months before Trump made that fateful tweet, that he was planning to pull troops out of Syria. And they delayed him that long, and it appears he just got pissed off and said, I don't care anymore, we're getting out. There was a phone call from the Turkish strongman Erdogan that appeared to trigger Trump's tweet and whatever decision-making he did before he picked up his phone. So I do understand that Trump violated protocols in doing that. He may have just been fed up at the obstruction of the military and the deep state, and people like General Mattis, who resigned in protest after he was overridden by his president. And finally today, more evidence that Apple is presumably the biggest tax cheat in the whole damn world. After they shelled out money to settle with Ireland over taxes that they had evaded, in 2016, Apple paid about 13 billion pounds in back taxes. I don't have the exact amount that translates to in American dollars. And likewise, the current agreement is a settlement with French authorities following a lengthy audit, and we're coughing up, Apple is coughing up another £500,500 to settle that. Now, Apple said the French tax authority recently concluded a multi-year audit of our French accounts, and the adjustment will be reflected in our publicly filed accounts. Now, here is the whopper. So far today, Trump is going to threaten, emergency action to get his border wall built, and he'll be telling more whoppers than we can count in the State of the Union message tonight. But here's what Apple said. We know the important role tax payments play in society. We pay all that we owe according to tax laws and local customs wherever we operate. Yeah. Apply that to the United States. And if there's anyone home at the Internal Revenue Service, will you please audit Apple and its tax avoidance schemes and bring those rogues to justice? Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it all over the damn place, and you'll find it on YouTube. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.